Konnichiwa, welcome to the Martial Maze. I'm without my partner in crime, Barakula Chidoshi. So you have Israel Lopez Sensei. You should know by now, especially if you're a fan of the show. So today's episode may come across more like a rant. Don't want you to take it that way, folks, that listen to the show. But it has come to my attention that a lot of the things that we do, sometimes, we get our fair share of hate mail. Like any platform, and we also have a whole lot of supporters, and I think this has more to do with the fact that in the martial community we're kind of a big tent, right? You have some of the folks that are more think of martial arts more as the art of making war, so they think more in the combative sense of things. So they're more like hardcore, you got to be able to fight, bang, this, that, and the third. Where you have other folk that feel like it should be just a way of life, being peaceful, humble, and they're more on the philosophical end of things. And yeah, they have some technique, but that's not their major. Their major is more the spiritual. I got to be peace with myself. And then you have some that are just kind of in the middle, right? Who want to have the combatives, but don't really want to be sport oriented. And even then, you have sport versus traditional old school, and it's just a big tent. You got people who just do forms, right? And some of those folks can't fight to save their lives, but they do forms. So the martial arts has grown into this kind of a big tent kind of thing, right? And in that tent, there's diverse opinions, right? And we love diversity, right? We do, we really do, and we welcome it. But this episode in itself, we were struggling for a title, but it's really simple, short, and sweet and to the point. If the shoe fits, right? And I say this, and for those that are maybe hearing this term for the first time, if the shoe fits, wear it. That's kind of where that term is. And instead of getting in your feelings and getting butthurt about something we said, you might want to take a step back, re-examine and look at why you felt the way you did or why you got triggered. I mean, we all get triggered, right? There are certain things I see in the martial community that triggers me. Case in point, one of my biggest, this I said it's going to sound more like a rant. One of my biggest pet peeves in the judo community is when someone in practice or when demonstrating a technique throws it and then rolls over with the guy, and the guy they threw ends up on top of them. It's a misrepresentation. To me personally, I honestly believe this, and there are quite a few that agree with this. It doesn't, well, it doesn't answer that first rule, right? That first, that's typically is your first action or combinations of should be able to neutralize a perceived threat. Well, if my major is throwing and I throw someone, right? And I throw them so hard where they end up on top of me. Well, I kind of failed that first question, right? So it doesn't make sense. It fits the sport of judo rather well, right? I mean, like when you throw the guy and I get the score and fight's over, match over, right? But anybody who's ever competed, or any judoka who's ever competed in a BJJ tournament will tell you in a heartbeat that's a good way to lose, right? Because the fight's not over. Right? It's not over. Anybody who's ever done that in real life will know that it's not a good best practice because the fight's not over, right? In fact, I brought him back into the fight. I got off this amazing throw, and he's now back in it. But I would be disingenuous if I didn't say that most of the folks that do that really are focused on the sport aspect of judo and not judo so much as a martial art. So with that being said, you end up seeing more of that, right? And that's the thing. And it's a pet peeve of mine, right? And even though I'll talk about it and I'll say it, and then there's some folks that'll go, "Well, you don't understand. That's sport, yeah, and you're trying to mix the two. You shouldn't mix the two." But well, we're gonna say it, right? And I'm triggered. I see it. I see an episode. One of the one of judo's best, Travis Stevens. He posted a really good reel. And in that reel, he does that very same thing. Now, this is an Olympian. This is Travis Stevens. He's a BJJ competitor, world class judoka. And so he knows better, right? But in this, he's doing the sport interpretation of this particular technique. And no way, shape, or form believes, or I no way, shape, or form believe that Travis Sensei in real life would um, do that, right? Like that would be his best practice, right? And there's that. So there are a lot of things that trigger folk in the martial community, and like I was saying, so circling back, because you know me, I'm a bit long-winded when I say these kinds of things or when I go off on these tangents, that you gotta reflect in yourself. That's a self-reflection issue, right? It's not an us issue. It's not anybody else who puts something on their platform. It's not their issue. If you got butthurt about something, or you got triggered, then you might want to understand why you got triggered, right? So, and another good example of this is so we have Barack Doshi does a show called Root to the Truth, right? And in the Root to the Truth, he is really examining the truths that we cling to in the martial community, right? On a grander scale. And then of course he's putting his 2 cents in. And he had did an episode that I really enjoyed, and it was controversial. Now, controversial, realistically, for those that don't know, it means basically that there are a lot of different opinions about something. Nothing's completely 100% the right answer, right? I mean, each point can be defended in one way or another. And he was reflecting on those who post a lot of content. And it wasn't so much as them posting a lot of content, it was really about giving away your school's secrets, or just the reasons, and he was really getting into demonstrations, and some of that and why we do them, right? And we've all been to one. With that being said, it's a good time to segue into DOSCon this weekend, New York City. If you don't have your ticket, what are you doing? Just saying. There will be plenty of demonstrations. There's going to be some live music. It's a good time, and we're going to be in the house. So there's that. So definitely you want to be at DOSCon. And for more information, and if you're wondering right now what the hell DOSCon is, you've been sleeping under a rock. It's still the #1 martial arts magazine, according to Amazon, in the world. All right, so it's #1 grossing selling magazine. It's Nathan Ingram's Deadly Art of Survival. We just call it DOS for short. And it's like I said, it's a good time. So you definitely want to make sure you make an appearance if you can. And all tickets are still available. I mean, I'm thinking about that now as I'm saying it. It might be sold out. I don't know. You might want to go get your ticket. Um, all right. So yeah, circling back, know your role. If the shoe fits, right? If the shoe fits. And that again, you know, we get a lot of heat. Anybody who's ever watched the our Modern Combative series on YouTube, the 50, I can't even say it right. I'm like brain farting right now. It's kind of crazy. Um, the 52 blocks, right? And that by far is still our most controversial episode to date. It's the one I listen. I get emails about this particular, and it's Professor Mo. He did the episode with us. He's been featured on the cover of Black Belt magazine. He's also a director. He's been in movies, and man, listen, the amount of heat over just calling that an African martial art. And the misconception is he isn't saying that it is an African martial art. He's basically saying that, from the slave ships to the United States, it's a martial system that went to jail. It was, something in the hood. But I got to tell you, how many people are like, no, that's not true. It was developed and designed in jail. Now, I ended up seeing a video with 52 blocks AOD. I think it was 52 blocks AOD. A friend of mine, Haskins Sensei, because he was in corrections for a long time, is how they trained the corrections officers into what to look out for. But that's a topic for another time. What I'm going to say is this: in the video that was produced by those folks from 52 blocks, they talk about the techniques and where they each one came from. Now, this is the founder, and well, I could be wrong. It's just people who were studying it hardcore, and it went to jail, meaning this system of fighting came from boxing, it came from this, it came from that, and and it was developed. So it's close quarter combat, of course, because you're in a jail cell, right? And stuff like that. But there's another brother who did a thing. His name escapes me right now. This is why I should have notes in front of me. See, Brock is a little more prepared than I am when it comes. I normally go off the cuff. Brock would have the notes in front of him. Um, and his brother had talked about, and he's not the first person I've ever heard say this. The only martial art that I know of that you go to jail and not know, but come out of jail knowing, is the knife, a shiv, a poke stick, a pokey, whatever you want to call that. You learn how to make one, fashion one. It's horrible. It's a horrible thing. I'm saying this out loud right now in my head, but it's a horrible thing. And he did a really good video on that. And he talks about that. That by far is the only martial system that I know of, that Israel Lopez Sensei knows of, that you might not know before you go to jail. You'll probably know it after you've done a nickel or so, right? It's because you're trying to survive in prison. But everything else went to prison. You understand? The fighting systems people listen. People went to jail were boxers. People went to jail were martial artists. People went to jail they went to jail with martial knowledge, and then applied it and made modifications. It did. eh, Again, it's still one of our most controversial episodes. We get heat for it all the time at the Marshall Maze. We just get hate mail and we get praises, and it's still by far the one episode that everybody seems to kind of go for or look for. It's just kind of crazy. It blows my mind. But again, it there are folks that get triggered. And a lot of the comments that are made is, why does everything have to be from Africa? Right? So there's somebody getting triggered based upon something that they're seeing in the martial community, and they're like, well, what? African Americans aren't responsible for anything. We can't do something. And then I think I fired back enough times to say, look, man, that's not the point he was trying to make or the point he was getting across. He wasn't trying to credit Africa for it. You know what I'm saying? But we do know our ancestors came from where? And it's kind of one of those things, and still making the connection back to where our ancestors came from. It made sense to me, but it may not make sense to everybody else. And so with that, there that is, right? Now going back to the different things that trigger folks, so where they feel like that, they're getting butthurt about it is, case in point, we talk a lot about the martial artists that just learn the kata, and they learn, I call it dancing, because if you don't have the bunkai, and you're not doing your kata two man, I'll personally just tell you, all you're really doing is learning fancy dancing. A lot of times you really don't understand the information. And that's based on my experience meeting others in that do kata, others that have won awards for kata. And when we get together and we have conversations, in-depth conversations, or when we're just physically doing a thing.
Hey, I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Shannon.
And together
we are Shrinking Heads,
two mental health providers, here to help you explore the jungle of mental health.
We invite you to join our bi-weekly podcast,
where we explore everything from how to find a therapist to how to break up with your therapist.
And we're going to use humor to hack through the jungle, because humor is self-care too.
So we encourage you to join us and download our podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, CastBox, Spotify, all of those major places. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Shannon.
And together
we are Shrinking Heads.
All of a sudden, that information that they should have gleaned from the kata is lost because realistically they didn't do it. They weren't doing it correctly. So recently, Hasikan Sensei blessed us with we start off with him. He's a really good friend of mine, so I always feel like I'm always comfortable going to him to start when I want to start a new project with the Marshall Maze. So we had Route to the Truth, which is really just Barack. We have the Path through the Maze, and in the Path through the Maze, in a nutshell, is exploring some of those things that trigger us in the martial community, some of the pet peeves, right? And he blessed us with the first episode of that particular series, and it's doing rather well. And it just talked about the rising block, and it's information that over the years, and this is something that he's explored. This is other martial artists explored it, and we start to learn that why are we continuing to perpetuate something that's just not right, or the understanding of the utilization of that particular technique or tool, however you want to use that. We just the misunderstanding or the misconception, and this really came for me anyway, from meeting a lot of folks that do kata. And we need to use a rising block, and they're using that rising block to block a front punch. And I was like, okay, all right, let's do this in real time. And the many times I've explored it that way, it didn't work. It wasn't effective. And even with the how, or the further examination of that particular technique has led us to really get a better understanding that when you're seeing it done in kata, with the exception with when you're not using two men, and even the engagement distance, became farther and farther away. So when I learned kata, I was learning it two man, and we were pretty close. So the information came across different. That rising block for us wasn't a rising block; it was more to capture. It allowed me to get to a grab, and I still to this day utilize that concept in order to close distance so I can get to my major. And my major is judo. I minor in striking. I major in throwing and grappling. So I'd still need to be able to get into that distance, right? It made sense. So before I digress, it again, a lot of heat. There are a lot of folks. Well, what that's not, and again, going against the grain. We're breaking the mold. There are a lot of things that we've always thought were true that and that's a hard thing because it affects us personally, and we get it. And that's why I said if the shoe fits, right? It's a personal time to reflect on oneself, or oneself when we think about our place in the martial community. I mean, we often hear folks say things like, you're always going to be a student. I'm a forever student. I'm a forever student, right? And I really don't think a lot of folks understand what that means when they make that statement that they're a forever student, or always continuing to learn. Because if you're always continuing to learn, that means the cup constantly gets empty. The cup constantly gets emptied, and you're coming back to it, right? I mean, you're coming back to get a better understanding. And the truth is that if you're constantly trying to learn or refresh, then you're almost always keeping things open. You always have an open mind. And if you don't have an open mind, I feel like then you're really not interested in the learning process. You're saying a thing, but you're not really doing a thing, if that makes any sense. And this happens a lot, you know. And again, we're always we have an open door policy, an open book policy. We tell folks, hey man, listen, if you don't like what we said or what we're doing, please write us. Come on in, talk to us, be on the show. We'll have you on. We can go round robin. We'll have a palather, an educated one though, because I don't entertain stupid. I just don't. Got no time for it. Zero tolerance. Brock might, I won't. I'm like, we just don't do that here. Come with some knowledge, right? And stuff like that, and be able to use your words. And we're all fighters here, and we're all damn good at it. So, it's one of those things. I can't be any plainer than that. But yeah, it's again, some of the mail we get is when we talk about those that are I won't call them big dojos, but they're martial arts as a business practice. When you have hundreds of students and you're bragging about, I got hundreds of students, and you walk in and their brown belts still don't have their belts tied. And again, let me walk this back a little bit, because it again kind of sound like a rant. You know, it if you're going to continue to embrace the Japanese culture, the Okinawan culture, and you're utilizing like the gi and the the obi, and you're doing all of that, you're speaking some of the traditional language, with the Okinawan or the Japanese or the Chinese. It I kind of feel like you don't get to kind of pick your poison and decide which way you're going to go with it, which way you're not, right? Because it kind of lends to to credibility, I guess. So, case in point, this was a really good one that we ended up receiving a whole lot of mail about. And this is emails, and so no one's sending things snail mail anymore. Um, but a whole lot of like inbox, kind of, hey, what's up, and stuff like that. And I should actually start releasing them. A lot of times I'll screen them out, so like when you don't see them on YouTube and stuff like that. Some comments I just let go because sometimes people just want to have a conversation, right? But then there's some of that stuff is just, again, what I just say. I don't entertain stupid. So, and I just don't. I have no time for it. It's really energy draining to if I was trying to do all of that. So we don't. And in this particular case, we getting a lot of hits on, you know, um, who are you to say, how our dojo is or our particular system and all this other good stuff. That's not the point. The point I'm making is that you have over 100 students in your brown belts. Their gis are dirty when you walk in. They're white gi. There you have brown belts who don't bow on and off the mat. You have your brown belts who, hell, don't even know how to tie their belt properly. You have brown belts who can't receive a strike, but you're teaching a striking art. You have black belts that can't receive. You have black belts that can't throw a punch to save their lives. What is going on here? Ching, your bank, your money in your pocket. That's what's going on there. And we see you, you know, and then you're upset because, and we're really good about not calling people out by name. We don't. We try not to. And even when we do use someone's name, like Jeff, a little while circling back, I said Travis Stevens. And again, it's a solid critique, and again, not taking anything away from the positive things he's doing, and for the martial community, especially for USA Judo. Um, so, and we're entitled to make an opinion, right? You put something out in the ether. That's another thing too. If you put something out there, no different than us, when we put something out in the ether, we're open to be ridiculed, right? Well, I prefer constructive criticism if someone has criticisms, but we're still out there. We put ourselves out there. And circling back to Barakulad Sensei's comment, en route to the truth, about posting a lot of content, if you're one of those folks who does that, and people start calling you out routinely over your content, well, that's a you issue, man. I'm like, you put your stuff out there, and you can't be mad about it. But I digress again. Um, we try not to throw names out there for a reason, because we'd be talking forever. I mean, there's not just one or two commercialized schools that just care more about the money than they do whether or not they're teaching something solid, the art. There's tons of them. So we'd have to have a list over here, kind of going down over all these different places. That's just that. And again, this is all subject to opinion, right? Because there is no solid standard in the martial arts. We're the only industry that does that, the martial arts industry, that there is no solid one standard. You can always find something else, or well, what about Tai Chi, or what about stretching, or what about this, or what about that, and you can go on and on. What about the people who just do kata, who train and just do kata? And stuff, well, if they're not fighting, they're not striking, they're not doing this, that, and third, then why are they doing it, right? And all this other crazy hootenanny. And we're again the only industry that doesn't have one core thing that everybody can get behind. Outside of that, we're all supposed to be teaching a form of combatives, and even then, that's open to interpretation. Because what did I just say? There's tons of folk out there that just do performance art. Like they might as well be in the Peking Opera. Because I mean, it looks great. It films great. I gotta tell you that. It looks amazing. You're filming it, but how much of that stuff can really be done in real time, right? How much of that stuff do they actually really know? You know, and well, hell, you're not even fighting that way in real life to begin with. It'll never look that beautiful. It'll never be that pretty unless you're fighting a fish. Then you got to ask yourself why you fighting a fish, or why you get into a fight in the first place. Yeah, that's a whole nother concept, another whole thing to discuss. But I feel like over time, if one reflects and looks back, you start to get the gist of things, right? You'll start to kind of figure that, well, that's their opinion, and either I'm going to take it or I'm going to walk away from it. Over time, I feel like you're either going to take it, reflect on it, grow from it, or you can just chalk it up to that's their opinion and screw those guys. And I mean, ultimately, you could make that argument about anything or any entity or persons or group out there that's somewhat of an authority in some way, shape, or form, right? Um, we can always inject, well, that's okay, that's them. I'm doing this over here, and move on. Your life will be better for it. Trust me, it really will be. Our mission statement was always to help folks that don't know any better begin to know better, to begin to ask real probing questions, to question the status quo. Because if we're trying to be forever students and trying to look at a process that's been done over the years and not make innovations, not get better with time, then I feel like we've all done ourselves a disservice in the martial community. Again, we have different tools out there now to develop our bodies better. We have folk in the mental health industry that kind of help keep our minds right, right? We have there, so there's different things that weren't there before in most combative systems that are there now. And then what we use it for is different. I was having a conversation with an individual the other day, and we were talking about why somebody would want to train in such a way where they're just a tool of war, right? Why would you need that now in a civilized society? And you got to start thinking about it, right? If you believe that we're headed towards a civil war, then you might be trying to train a certain kind of way, get a certain kind of things under your belt to get ready to go if that were to happen, right? And or if you're one of those people that there may be something wrong with you, if you really want to make that kind of war, like, and when I say war, what I'm referring to is those folks that there are folk right now that are training on a high level of combatives. And when I say a high level, they're going firearms. They're learning how to like to how to make different devices and stuff like that. And I'm going to be really careful how I word some of this stuff because I don't want to get no one in trouble. Because again, I don't know their intention. I don't know why they're training this way. What I would tell you is, me personally, it's like, you make sure, man, whoever those instructors are out there, I would tell you, you make sure you're screening people. And again, my question here would be, why are you here? Why are you training this way? What do you want from this program? And I'd really, and then I also ask myself, why am I teaching this program? So there's that too. And who am I? So that's, and again, it's Marshall Mays. Our mission statement, as I stated earlier, or begin to state, was really about and continues to be helping folks navigate the complexities and pitfalls that one may find when studying martial arts. Because we're a big tent, y'all. We are. We're a big tent, a lot of different personalities, a lot of different paths. And you got to know. So, in closing, if the shoe fits, wear it. And you've been listening to The Martial Maze.